with my college football schedule preview and point spread prediction videos. Today we'll be doing the Miami Hurricanes. Miami's non-conference schedule is a lot tougher this year than it was last year because last year they played three little teams and Florida, and this year they play two little teams, Bethune Cookman, which is an FCS team, and South Florida, which is a Group of Five team, which will be two easy wins for Miami. But then they play Notre Dame and Florida, and this makes it one of the toughest non-conference schedules in the country because they play two Power Four opponents, one that's great and one that's decent. And for Miami to have much of a chance of beating Notre Dame, I think their run defense is going to have to be a lot better because Notre Dame is going to be one of the best rushing teams in the country, I think. And even if Miami's offense is as good as it was last year, Notre Dame's defense, I think, is going to be good enough to slow them down. And uh, even though Miami blew out Florida uh, last year, and Cam Ward had a big game in that one, and he's gone now, I wouldn't just assume that this one's going to be much closer. This year, because Miami's new quarterback Carson Beck is 2-0 against Florida, and even though Miami, I know, loses their top four wide receivers from last season, and Damian Martinez at running back, who was a 1,000-yard rusher. Carson Beck did not have great wide receivers at Georgia last year, and against Florida last year, Georgia's best running back, ETN, didn't even play, and Carson Beck still led them to win. And Miami's conference schedule has four different opponents than it did last season. So last year they played California, Duke, uh, Georgia Tech, and Wake Forest, and instead this year they'll play Stanford, SMU, NC State, and Pittsburgh. And I don't really think that makes much of a difference because even though I think that SMU is probably a better team than any of those four teams that I named that they played last season, Georgia Tech beat Miami last season. So this is not a very tough schedule in my opinion. Uh, but I think Miami's ceiling is 10-2 because I don't see them winning all four of Louisville, Notre Dame, Florida, and SMU. And Mario Cristobal always loses a game that he's not supposed to lose. And it's unusual and probably not good how Miami did their bye weeks this year because they play a game and then take a bye week and then play one game and then take their next bye week. So their first bye week coming right before Florida State. I don't really think comes at a good time because even though I know it's a rivalry game on the road, Florida State's a team that I think is just going to be trying to find their way out of the garbage can this year. But I do think their second bye week comes at a good time up before what's going to be a big game against Louisville. So good news for Miami is their new defensive coordinator from Minnesota coached against Miller Moss last season and held USC to just 17 points. And even though I know the quarterback isn't everything in an offense, it's still impressive. But Louisville is probably going to have a better offensive line than USC had last season. And I think it's good that Miami gets to play Stanford in between Louisville and what's probably going to be a top three toughest game on Miami's schedule on the road at SMU. So Stanford is a horrible team. They don't recruit very well and they don't use the portal much and they're not very well coached. That should be an easy win for Miami. And Syracuse, I would lean Miami in that one because even though I know Syracuse beat them last year, that was just really because of Kyle McCord. He had a huge game in that one. And without Kyle McCord, Miami might have even have blown out Syracuse. And I would feel much better if I was a Miami fan about having Carson Beck replace Cam Ward than I would if I was a Syracuse fan having it whoever is going to replace Kyle McCord at quarterback because Carson Beck has been one of the best quarterbacks in the country the last 2 seasons, and Syracuse is probably going to be starting an inexperienced quarterback this year. And Kyle McCord had even bigger numbers than Cam Ward did last year, even though he probably won't get drafted as high. And NC State is a weird team because they'll surprise and win 9 games, and then the next year they're supposed to be a contender to win the ACC, and then they're not even that good. And last year was an example of that. So knowing how they are, they'll probably find a way to win 9 games this year. But Miami's got a lot more talent than they do, and it should be a win for them. And to have to play 2 road games in a row to in the season, Miami got it good because neither Virginia Tech or Pittsburgh is very good. So Virginia Tech, I think, blew their chance to have a good year last year because they had all that production coming back, which means this year they probably won't have very much production coming back. But Virginia Tech can be a tough place to play, so I wouldn't be surprised if that game is close. But Pittsburgh, they started 7-0, which was a surprise last year, and then after that they couldn't win a game and finished 7-6. So they showed that they were just fakes last year. I wouldn't expect Miami to have too much trouble with that one. They should beat both Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh. I think Miami's got a decent chance to get to the ACC championship. So now for the point spread prediction games in the green are games where I think Miami will be favored to win by a blowout, which is 20 or more points, and there's 3 of those: Bethune-Cookman, South Florida, and Stanford. Games in the blue are games where I think they'll be favored to win by double digits, 10 to 19 points, and there's 2 of those: Florida State and NC State. Games in the purple are games where I think they'll be favored to win by about a touchdown, 6 to 9 points. And there's 4 of those: Florida, Louisville, Virginia Tech, and Pittsburgh. Games in the gray are games where I think Miami will be about a field goal underdog, 1 to 5 points. And there's 2 of those: Notre Dame and SMU. Games in the pink are games where I think Miami will be about a field goal favorite, so 1 to 5 points, and there's 1 of those Syracuse. So Bethune Cookman, Miami should be favored by at least 50 points, and South Florida, the spread will probably be about 35 points, and Stanford, I think the spread will be around 20 points. And Florida State, Miami should be favored in that one by a couple of touchdowns, maybe 14 points. And NC State, the spread should be around 10 points. And Florida, I think Miami will be favored by, I'll say, 7 points. In Louisville, I think they'll be favored by, I'll say, 7 points. And Virginia Tech, I think Miami will be favored by about 7. But that would probably be a blue game if it was a home game. In Pittsburgh, I think Miami will be favored by 8 or 9 points. And Syracuse would probably be a purple game if it wasn't for them beating Miami last year. But I'll say that Miami will be favored by about 5 points in that game. And Notre Dame, I think, will be about a 1 point favorite over Miami. And SMU, that one's in the gray because it's a road game. It'd be in the pink if it was the home game, but I think SMU will be favored by, I'll say, a point in that one. So that will be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.